me and Smacks now wants to build our own gaff.
Yeah.
Down into the garden.
Yeah.
It's our own gaff, and it's a she-bean. Let's just say for argument's sake.
Sure.
And we get planning permission.
Yeah.
From then, we can just build that ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So here, it's a more complicated system than just that. So the system for building your own house, planning permission is an important part. You want to make sure you're allowed to build the thing.
neighbours on side.
Keep the neighbours on side. That's the biggest trick to getting planning permission, right?
Yeah.
No complaints. The second thing is, if you want that house to be insured, which most people will because it's a huge investment to build a house, the insurance company will only insure it if you have an engineer's approval to build the house. So you need to engage an engineer to produce a set of drawings that the insurance company are happy with. And you can still build the house, but the engineer will come and check that you've built it according to the drawings that they drew. And if you did, then we're good. Then the insurance company is happy that the house is built to the right specs for the engineer. The engineer signs off saying this house has been built the right way. And then that satisfies the bank, who are the ones giving you the mortgage to build the house, or the shebeen, or whatever it is out the back, right?
Yeah.
If you don't need a mortgage, you suddenly have more options. If for some reason you don't want to insure your house, you have more options again. And all these tools are there in the hardware stores. All the knowledge is out there for you to build your own stuff. It's all there for you to play with. It just depends on your level of reliance on someone else to fund it. Really,
okay.
In the end.
So in Ireland, most houses we see are block, cavity wall, but I'm hearing about people like using bales of straw as insulation and all kinds of alternative methods of doing it.
Sure. Yeah.
What's some of the more unusual ways of building a house that you've seen in Ireland, or that you tried yourself?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's endless ways. This is the thing. Buildings never used to be just one thing. If we look at structures all over the world, people built with whatever they had access to.
Yeah.
Wherever they lived, anywhere in the world. I would say it's more alternative to be building with concrete blocks that are getting shipped across the country in trucks and aren't natural at all to your environment than it is to be building with the mud or the earth or the trees that are growing around you. That's the leap that we've taken. Now, today, of course, we're building with concrete everywhere. That's become the most efficient way for us to build these block houses.
Yeah.
And it's not wrong. It's a great way to build. It's a strong way to build. There's nothing wrong with block-built house, cavity wall, kingspan insulation. It's going to work. What
are the other options that people have that they probably don't know they have?
So timber frame is something that's really commonly used all over the world. It feels like a very new concept here in Ireland to be building out of timber, but it's been used for just as long as stone has been used, depending on the culture that it came from. And, our fear is every time I talk about a new material, the first thing that comes up for people is like, oh, the rain, the wind, something's going to destroy that.
I was just about to
thing.
say that. I had a storm last night, and straight away I'm thinking, will it withstand that?
Oh, that'll be fine in Australia. It wouldn't last over here now. Yeah.
So, I almost need to just straight away say, okay, timber frame, metal roofs. What else can I say that'll scare people and bring some fear out?
You were talking about mud and trees there a minute ago. That's scary enough now.
Yeah, and building out of earth, right? That now would be seen as the most alternative thing ever.
When you say building out of earth, what do you mean now?
Okay, so building out of mud. It's called adobe, or it's called cob, and it's the ground under our feet, right? It's always made up of some amount of sand, clay, and organic material.
Yeah.
Leaves, composted stuff, grass, whatever. When you get the sand and the clay, what you have is an aggregate and a binder. So you have all the building blocks, which is the aggregate, that's the sand and the stones and that kind of stuff, and you have a binder, which is the clay. It glues it all together. That is what came before concrete.
Yeah.
Right? Concrete is aggregate and a binder. We just made a binder that was much stronger and much more permanent than clay.
But have you built a house out of clay?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've built dozens of houses out of clay.
And what is the clay going onto a frame, or how?
So you mix the clay with the sand to the right consistency that it's almost like Play-Doh.
Okay, so you're not making bricks of it.
You freeform. You can make bricks out of it as well. That's a perfect way to use it too. You dry it out and then you build it. Now, it rains here. The clay is going to get wet again.
Yeah.
But any material, as long as it's given the opportunity to dry out, it will dry out. And clay, I was working on a house in Port earlier this year, 300 years old, built with clay, hardly taken care of at all, and it just it's been there for this whole time. It had been treated completely the wrong way. It had a metal roof put on it. It had cement plaster put on the outside of it. Everything you could have done wrong to it, they did to it. And as far as working with natural materials goes,
it's still standing.
It's still standing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still lost. So you're just going to, so you get clay and you make the mix, right? And you're happy with the mix.
Yeah.
And then you're not putting that like onto a timber frame with mesh around it. You can freeform it up.
Yeah. This is the entire process. So you make it, it's freeform. Think of it like Play-Doh.
Yeah.
And you can build a house any shape you want, any way that you want.
Loads of curves and stuff.
Yeah, well, see, we always used to build with curves. We only started building straight lines when we started using more repetitive materials, bricks and things that were straight.
Well, when I was an apprentice now, there was a couple of curves there that shouldn't have been there now. I am a qualified carpenter, but there was a lot of unnecessary curves.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think the trick with these like earthen materials and everything like that is just using them in the right way. There's this university, Plymouth University over in the UK, and these 5 professors have gotten together and they've just built the first earthen house that meets current UK housing standards as far as energy ratings and everything goes, structurally sound, everything, completely built out of mud. And they built it in the middle of Plymouth University on the campus grounds there.
Is it quick to build with?
No. It's slower to build with than block, for sure, because you've got to let it dry.
Yeah.
And so you have to, you spend a lot of time putting tarps over it. It takes a lot of energy. That's the hardest thing. It's a lot of work. And I think when it comes to what are you going to build your house with, it depends what you've got more of. Do you have a lot of time or do you have a lot of money? And if you've got a lot of time and you don't have a lot of money, earth is a great way to build a house.
Yeah.
It is a way to create shelter and protect yourself and look after yourself.
Can I ask you about your own house?
Yeah, for sure.
And did you build it yourself?
Yeah, I built it myself. Well, I kind of worked in collaboration with some builders of like 200 years ago who had this old stone cottage. And for me, coming to Ireland was unreal. The whole country. I'd never been here before. I'd never even considered coming to Ireland before, and I landed here. I fell in with some good people. Must be following a woman, were you? I wasn't. I started traveling around the country, and it's covered in these what everyone's calling ruins, which are these stone buildings that, to me, coming from Australia, are like castles. They're incredible. Like if you can build a building that lasts 200 years, 300 years. That is a good building. You've done an incredible job of building something that can last that long. And so I got to buy one of these ruins and I got to add to it and adapt it, make it a little bit more oriented towards the sun, add some new materials into it. And I think there's so much beauty and strength in these old buildings, and we've got to be smart with how we work with them. We want to learn everything we can from the things they did right and everything that they did wrong, because they made a lot of mistakes. They didn't know as much as we know now about how buildings work, how damp works, how moisture flows. And
so your own gaff?
My own house. So
how long did it take you, and did you save a lot of money by doing it your way?
Yeah, sure. So what we did, it was around 6 years ago now. It was me and another guy, a friend of mine at the time. He lived in Dublin. I was buying it as a home to live in while I was still traveling and working a lot. He was using it as a place to escape from the city to go to. Nice. Not a builder. I don't recommend going into partnership to build a house with someone if they're not a builder. But look, we learn these lessons as we go. But typical kind of 1-bedroom stone cottage, I knocked down a good section of the south-facing wall, added 40 square meters to it, all facing the sun. Quite a bit of glass in it. Yeah. Built with timber frame, metal roof on it, which was pretty controversial at the time. It had a slate roof on it, on the rest of the cottage, and the extension that I put on had a metal roof, which my neighbours all thought was a shed. Like
it's like big sheets, is it?
Big sheets.
Cladding
big sheets of metal corrugated roofing. It's getting more normal now, but 6 years ago, my neighbours, really thought that I was building something for animals to do.
Long story short.
Yeah.
You did this yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, and how doable is it? Are you a qualified tradesman? Or?
That's what I was just about to ask. How tasty a builder are you?
Yeah, exactly. So I have a lot of experience building, but I still didn't do this by myself. So I'd been on the road building for 10 years at this point.
Do you have the qualification?
No, not officially. I never went to school. I never did an apprenticeship, but I've been building since I was 17. It's the only thing I've been doing since I was 17. And I was never in a country long enough to get an official qualification.
Okay.
Right? So I've been all over. Basically, I left Australia when I was 18. I went to Africa. I was in Kenya for what ended up being a year.
I'm going to ask you about that in a second.
Yeah. So anyway, what I did from my house, I called in all these favors from 10 years of being on the road.
Good man.
I reached out to everyone. I was like, you remember when I helped you out building your place and whatever here and there? So I had two Australians, 3 Americans, an Indian friend, and like a bunch of people dropping in and out from Ireland who I'd met while I was here. And we built this house in 4 weeks. We redid the whole thing. We gutted it right back to the stonework. We re-roofed it, re-insulated it, poured floors. We did the entire thing in 4 weeks, and then it was done. And then I left the country and I was off working again, doing my next job. And
how many people were working on this? You said 5, 6?
At any one time, there's probably 6 people there.
And not asking you your business, but like
No, that's
roughly
fine.
budget.
Oh yeah, so the budget. I paid them in alcohol and
it's the best
food.
kind.
Yeah, absolutely. Because for
And
them,
crack.
they were learning.
Tax-free.
Anecdotes.
I was teaching them how to build
Yeah.
while we worked, and I was making sure everyone had a good time.
But the methods and the material, you said,
Yeah,
a lot of money.
methods and materials. It cost me $40,000 to redo the entire house. So to go from a stone ruin back to a fully livable. It was only 1 bedroom, but it's all I needed at the time. You know, so $40,000 to turn it into what it became. We've now put probably another $40,000 into it by now, adding on 2 more bedrooms, connecting to the old animal sheds that were next to it, and it's gotten a bit longer and wider. So we're up to about $80,000 in. We bought the 5 acres and the cottage for $80,000 6 years ago as well. So now we're sitting at around $160,000 all in for our place, which isn't that cheap.
House and 5 acres though, still
It's
like.
it's a 4-bedroom house and 5 acres that we've got now.
It's very good.
And so it's not bad for 100. And we earned it as we went. We never got a massive mortgage to do this. We paid for it as we went the whole way.
Will your house last?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've built it with like everything I've ever learned from being a conventional builder and all the stuff I learned from overseas and traveling and everything like that. But look, any of these materials, whether it's timber or straw or wood or stone or whatever, it doesn't matter. If you build in the right way, if you give everything an opportunity to dry out, which is kind of the most important thing in a country that rains as much as it does here, as long as things are given the chance to dry out, they're going to last.
Okay.
There's no reason that they'll fall apart.
Is this a learnable skill? Is this a real option for people now? Like I know you do courses, but
I'm terrible at like any form of DIY.
Yeah.
Like from changing a light bulb the whole way to
he's an ideas guy.
Yeah, I'm an ideas man.
Yeah.
Could I learn to do this?
Yeah, 100%. Like, why do you think you're terrible at it? It's because you've never done it. It's because you've never committed to doing it.
I did like woodwork in school and so very bad.
Yeah, but imagine if you had to do it, right? Like, imagine if that was your only option. And that's how crazy things are right now, is that for a lot of people...
It may be the only option, yeah.
For some people, that is the only option. They can't afford to get someone else to build their house. They can't afford to buy a house that's already built.
Yeah.
So people are now looking at these derelict ruins in the countryside, and they're like, Jesus, that's all I can afford. And then they're coming to the courses that we run at Common Knowledge and learning how to renovate them and then going back and starting to work on them.
Are you seeing a massive uptake in the courses and people wanting to build their own houses? Because obviously we've got cost of living crisis and houses are fucking mad expensive.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I'd say the mix of people coming on our courses are half of them are coming because they actually need to learn how to build for themselves because there's no other way they're going to do it. And the other half are coming because they actually just want to be a bit handier. They want to understand how this stuff works so they can have conversations with their builders so that they can actually have some input into the design.
Yeah.
And so they can really learn that their opinion is valid in this conversation. This is their house. This is probably the most expensive thing they will ever buy, ever commit to in their whole life. And we pay for it with our life, with our time, 30 years on a mortgage, whatever it is, right? And some people don't even feel like they have a valid opinion in what materials it should be built with, what shape it should be, how it should look, how much sun should be getting into it. They kind of get railroaded into this is what a proper building's built with. This is what a house looks like. Yeah. And then that mentality is what gave us Bungalow Bliss, right? That's what gave us these 5 different houses that are repeated all over the country. Yeah. Because that's what a house looked like.
Yeah.
We were talking off air that you're friends with Moncon McGann. Yeah. We had him on the podcast and he built his own house.
Yeah.
So we need you to tell us honestly now, does it look terrible, or is it a good house?
So Muncon's.
Because he says it's great,
That's
but
loaded.
I
That's a loaded question. No, look, Muncon built 2 houses, and the first house he lived in for several years, I think 5 or 6 years or something, and then it fell down. That house, apparently, from what I see, wasn't built perfectly. Muncon was missing a few pieces, and Muncon actually wrote the foreword in my book, and he talks about how he was basically. He was missing the book on foundations. It was out at the time when he was trying to build his house. And that's the reason his first house fell down, which is a great excuse, 30 years later. But Muncon's now house is beautiful in that Muncon got cold feet. He was all into natural building. He was all into like doing things alternatively. He'd seen people build different ways all over the world. And so he was going to build this thing out of straw bale again. He was going to do it. And he got cold feet and built it with concrete block because someone came by who knew how to build with concrete block. And I think that's one of the best reasons to build with a material is like, you've got to build with what you've got. And that goes for knowledge as well. And if someone comes across your path who knows how to build with a certain material and you need a house, you're going to build out of that material. And it makes perfect sense. And so Muncon got this perfect square concrete house built. And then when the brickie left, he went at it with a consaw and a jackhammer and rounded off all the corners and made it look earthen and hippie and whatever. And
great.
but it's gorgeous. It's a beautiful house and it's simple, but it's all he needs.
Can I ask you? You mentioned you travelled a lot.
Yeah.
And you went to Africa. Where'd you go in Africa?
Yeah, I was in Kenya mostly, in East Africa, but mostly in Kenya. I was there back in 2008. And I went there back then I went with an NGO to build a school or something.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what it was. That was a thing that was happening,
It's something we always talked about doing. We'd love to do it.
15 years ago, yeah. And look, I went there. The NGO wasn't that great and the thing we were working wasn't that great. But there was huge riots that started while I was there, the 2008 election riots.
In Nairobi?
In Nairobi and all over Kenya. And do you remember that?
Oh, vaguely. I have an aunt. She just left Nairobi. She was living there for the last 10 years.
Well, she would definitely know about it. This was massive. The whole country was at war with itself. It was basically ended up being a tribal war. The two political parties.
You were there.
I was there. This 18-year-old Australian guy
building away.
Building away.
Can't we just build with mud? Everybody chill.
We were building out of brick and concrete there. We mixed concrete for an entire school building by hand with shovels. Man. It was me and like 15 African guys who were all showing me how you really work, and we were mixing concrete and wheelbarrowing it in and pouring huge concrete slabs. But I stayed. The NGO left. They pulled out. Everyone left. But I decided to stay because I realized it was a really internal conflict that was going on there. I wasn't in any danger. They weren't worried about the white guy there. It was all about the political parties and everything that was going on.
You weren't scared?
There were times when I had to leave, where I went over to Uganda and I went to Rwanda. I would leave for a little while when things got heated. When the riots really broke out, they broke out and they were wild. But I learned so much by staying, and I kept doing my projects, and I found better projects. I found projects that really needed some support and some help. And as the 18-year-old, I think going there and funding these buildings and building these buildings was my own form of rebellion against my mum wanting me to get some high-powered job and go to university and do all these things. That was never the vision for me. I think I had some kind of commitment phobia back then, and the idea of 4 years.
I was going to ask, what gets into the head of an 18-year-old that goes, do you know what? I'm going to head off to Africa now and start building stuff.
Yeah, well, I was all set.
Were you getting paid?
No. I was paying.
Where'd you get the money?
I earned it making coffees and pouring drinks in Sydney.
So you got enough money to go, as
you
they say.
Haven't you heard? Are you the only two Irish people who haven't heard? Wages are great in Australia. You can earn enough to... No, but I did.
All our friends reporting back.
Exactly, yeah. No, I did. Look, I made coffee in the day and I poured drinks at night time. I worked in some construction. It depended what was paying more at the time.
Yeah.
And I earned enough to go overseas and do this trip. I stayed. I got loans. I built 2 buildings on a credit card while I was there.
What did you
just
build?
cash withdrawals.
What did you build?
the houses for people. So I ended up one of these times when I was getting out of Kisumu was the town that I was in. It's in western Kenya on Lake Victoria. And when things got really intense there, when the city was really fighting, I would just get out. And one of these times I just went to a village kind of close to the border of Uganda. And I just met people and I talked with them and we got talking.
Are you the only white guy there now, really?
Yeah. The rest of the organization had left. There was one other girl who stayed for a while and we were traveling around and doing some stuff together. And anyway, I end up in this village, get talking to them. They don't have a hospital. They don't have access to any medical centers or anything. They literally need a building because they have a nurse who works out of someone else's living room, but can only use it for 3 hours a day. And so we built a building about the size of this room that ended up being their hospital. So
you arrive into town like on the bus or what?
Yeah.
And as the only white guy, and then you're like, do you know what? Let's build a doctor's unit.
Yeah, but look, that's the beauty of like traveling, and especially back then, like no one had smartphones, no one was like Googling where to go. I'd literally meet someone at a hotel or at a hostel, and they were like, "Hey, you should go to this village."
Hostel.
Hostel.
Yeah. We say hostel.
Hostel. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. And they would tell you where to go, and so I'd show up somewhere. I might have met someone. I might have been told to meet someone, and you just keep going.
Would they just trust you off the bat?
No,
do you know what I mean? Like,
it's the same here. 2 pints and you trust someone, enough to like let them build you a building for free.
Yeah, that's funny. If someone rocked up to the door and were like, "I'm going to build you something," I'd be like, "Get away." But as you said, if I met them after 2 pints, probably he seems like a nice, reasonable guy.
Yeah.
Well, what were the pubs like in rural Kenya?
Yeah, so they were full of expats, full of people working for the UN or UNICEF or the World Bank. There was a lot of everything going on there. There were these wild like melting pots where it all came together, where all the parts of all the different elements of the country would meet at these hotel bars, basically.
Okay, yeah.
And you'd be playing pool and you'd have like someone from the UN over there and then you'd have someone coming in from an NGO over here and everyone would be talking about their different experiences. Everyone drinking gin and tonics to keep the malaria away. You know, it's exactly as you think it would look like.
Some experience. How long did you stay there?
So I was meant to be there 2 months and I stayed a year in the end. And then I came back to Australia and had the pretty classic reverse culture shock of everyone valued different things to what I did after spending a year over there, watching people get killed, watching people like starve to death, like this crazy stuff that was going on in the middle of a war for them. Yeah. And I came back to Australia and people were complaining about the amount of froth on top of their coffee. And so I left again pretty quick and I went to India. And again, meant to be there 2 months, but ended up staying for 2 years. And I fell in with a really good NGO there, a really solid NGO who truly were an NGO, a non-government organization who were doing all this good work. And they were completely privately funded just by people like them asking individuals for money and people helping support their projects. And so I ended up staying with them. Living in the Gandhi ashram. I built 13 preschools and 2 community centers over that 2 years.
You're living in an ashram?
I was living in an ashram. Now, it was a working ashram. It wasn't like the kind of ashrams where you go to where everyone's meditating every day. It's this Gandhi had these working ashrams where work was part of the process. You had to work for a certain amount of hours.
So for anyone
who
doesn't know what an ashram is, it's...
Well, I mean, an ashram in India, it's a physical space. It's usually a cluster of buildings. There's like usually a few community buildings, maybe some housing attached to it. And people would go there and spend years of their life committed to whatever the ashram was committed to.
People would have called it kind of like a commune back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And these were people totally united around some kind of ideals. And now Gandhi had a huge following while Gandhi was doing his work there. But his belief was really around non-violence and around work.
From Kenya to India to Ireland.
Well,
why Ireland?
Oh, and like
Clare is kind of the India of Ireland, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. No, look, of all the countries, like in Europe, I guess I'd been on the road 10 years, majority of which like not in English-speaking countries. I think I was craving somewhere where I could really communicate with people and have deeper conversations than food and travel, because that was about the extent of my languages in all the different places I ended up with, or where's the local hardware store, that's kind of it. And so when I got here, I was in a place that spoke the same language that I spoke, but had this culture that was so strong and subtle at first. You wouldn't pick it. You don't come to Ireland for a week and like see the true culture, you know.
Yeah.
But you stay here for 6 months, you stay here for a year, and you start feeling this culture of hospitality, of music, and especially in Clare, like you walk into any pub in Ennistimon in the middle of the day on a Wednesday, and there's someone playing the most incredible fiddle or harp or something going on, and there's like stone wall building festivals out on Inisheer, and there's this stuff that is.
There's a stone wall building festival.
Yeah, you just missed it. Next year, man. Next year.
So people just go and build walls?
Yeah, well, people go and learn how to build walls.
No cement around, just stone wall stacking.
Well, that's dry stone walling, and then there's other kinds of stone walling as well. But this is the thing.
Everybody
it's
off
like
their biscuit, like building walls. No.
but that's what culture is. Culture is celebrating knowledge. It's celebrating tradition.
Ennistimon is funnily having a real resurgence.
Yeah.
From a town that, like in the 60s and 70s and 80s, had been a market town, was gone a bit dour. I drove through Ennistimon last year, like it's got all these hipster cafes and cute little pubs, like Ennistimon is back.
Yeah. Well, it's trying, it ebbs and flows, but it's thriving at the moment, and I think it's one of these beautiful towns on the west coast there that has this permanent year-round community. It's not a tourist town. It's not somewhere that only thrives when there's tourists around. It has this.
Are you throwing shade at Lahinch there?
He's got into the turf war, man. Yeah, he's been living there long enough.
Dig at Lahinch.
No, you see, officially, I live in Ina, so anyone in Ennistimon will say you don't live in Ennistimon, but it's where I buy. It's where I go to Super Value. So it's definitely my local.
That's
town.
how you judge it. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. You've got a new TV show.
I do. I have a TV show with
Build Your Own Home. 4-part documentary. Yes. So, tell it. So you're going to be showing people how to essentially build their own homes. And what kind of people are on the show? Like, is it like you've got a young couple? I know there's a family here as well. I can see it in my notes, and
I might need to read your notes to see what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say.
Well, you've got people from all different scenarios.
Walks of life. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Like. We all need housing, but like I'm saying, we all need housing that looks slightly different depending what stage of life we might be at or where we're from or what work we do, whatever it is, right? And so the four different episodes are all with 4 very different family situations in different settings in different parts of the country. And I don't show people how to build their own house necessarily. I teach them the skills that they need to do it themselves.
Yes.
And so I will go for a day and I'll teach them how to use the tools. I'll teach them how it works. We might build a sample of something together and then I'll leave for a month and I'll come back and they've done that around the whole house. And see, that's the thing with building is that it's really just a combination of like fairly simple tasks done on repeat, maybe 100, maybe 1,000 times. And so you teach someone how to build a wall in one place, then they can repeat that and they can reference back to it 100 times and keep building it the whole way around.
It's funny, this is like a big question, but as you say, you pay someone else to build your house and then you give 30 years paying for it. Would you be as well off, if you could, almost quit your job for a year and build your own house?
Yeah. That's the big question, right? How much is it? How much is it worth?
Or go part-time.
Yeah, I see what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, well, so just do the maths, right? If you're going to pay someone, let's say you're going to pay... We'll even go modestly. We'll say you managed to buy a house for 400,000, right? And it serves you and your 3 kids.
Around Tipperary now, that would get you a big house.
Okay, so so a 4-bedroom house for 300 or 400,000.
Out the country or in an estate?
Anywhere you want, wherever, out in the country.
Out the country, you would get a good house for 300,000, 320 maybe.
Okay, let's work with that. Let's work with that. So if
350,
if 50% of that is going to go to the builders. Right, so that we're at 175,000 is going to go to labour to build the house, and that's fine. That's their job, and that's what they do, and that's perfect for someone who can afford that. But if you could build the house yourself in a year or even in 2 years, depending on what your annual income is, that's pretty quickly going to tell you which is the more cost-effective option for you.
Yeah.
Right? At the time. That's the really simple way of looking at it. Now, you still need to get trades in. It's more complicated than to hire labor or not to hire labor.
Yeah.
A lot of people just take on the project managing role. And so they're contracting every individual job. So rather than hiring a construction company who does all that work for you or an architect who does all that work for you, they keep the project managing role. They find the electrician, they find the plumber, they find the metal worker or whoever they're working with, and they do that on their scale. And you're going to see on the show how much money you can save just by taking on the project manager role. Not even by doing all the work yourself, but just doing the stuff you can, just cleaning up after the builders, just putting the insulation in, because you do not need to study building for 4 years to learn how to put insulation in a wall. That's not a highly skilled craft, right? And there's no reason that an owner builder couldn't do that themselves rather than paying someone 200 euros a day to do that for them. And there's all these little things around the house, like why do we pay people to sweep up our construction site for us? That's a pretty privileged place to be in. And when you hire a construction company to do your entire job for you, in the end, at some point, you're paying someone to sweep up your site for you. And you're going to work in your work, or you're signing up to a mortgage for however long. Yeah. And that's part of the thing that you're paying for. And I think really the reason that we choose a 30-year mortgage over all of this work ourselves is the anxiety that comes
people are afraid.
Yeah. Of course.
Harrison, when you just said there you got to contact the electrician, I was in my mind I was stressed already.
Well, exactly, because there's only 4 electricians in Ireland these days anyway. So.
Man, thanks so much for coming in.
Yes, of
course. Final questions, John?
Yeah, if people want to sign up for a course, how can they do it?
So we started a not-for-profit, which is called Common Knowledge, and we teach people how to build their own houses. Now, not everyone's leaving. It's a 5-day course. Not everyone's leaving and going and building their own houses, right? This is all stepping towards understanding how houses work, what you can do, how involved you can be, and just learning the language. So you can actually go into a hardware store and ask for something and not feel like a complete idiot if they don't have it. And you're like, shit, I only rehearsed how to ask for this one thing. I don't know how to ask for the next thing. I'll come back another day. So we're just getting people used to using tools, understanding what materials are called, understanding how to switch things out if something's not available. Yeah. And some people are coming to do a 5-day course and then building their own shebeens out in their backyard.
It's a good place to start.
It's an amazing...
Because it's a fun project.
Yeah, it's a fun project.
And you don't mind if the floor is a little bockety or...
Yeah, totally. And that's where it should be. We need to lower the stakes a little bit. If we're learning to do this stuff, if you're learning to cook for the first time, right?
You don't cook for like your sister's wedding.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, look, we're running courses at Common Knowledge. People can find us at ourcommonknowledge.org. And we'll be running courses all year next year on a bunch of different things, but a lot of it is around building your own house.
Unbelievable.
Thanks, man. We could have stayed here for the day.
Yeah, thanks a million for coming in. I wish we got on to you before we built this fucking studio. Thanks a million, Harrison. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.